Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast Addendum with me, your host, Imperial Dane, Master of Propaganda and stuff. Of today's topic, I think I want to talk about, the possibility of, doing more with officers in Company H3. I mean, for a game that sort of talks about companies, you try to do more with your infantry and just, displaying a bit more accurately in some ways at least. The officers have already gotten rather short thrift from Relic. They tend to be sort of very underdeveloped and just not very present. I mean, there's only really companies too, for example, that sort of having anything bigger, and that was mostly for the Americans. They're just this tech options. But the Soviets got really no officers in the game. The Germans, got an artillery field officer, but he's walking around there with a staff, officer's uniform, which is definitely not the sort of chap running around in the front line usually. You got the Brits with a bit there. The Oberkommandeur has the Sturm officer, and that's it. But there's just all sort of no real sort of coherent sort of actual officers there. I mean, they never mind the lack of squad leaders for the most part. And I do think that's an area where they can sort of do more and also do it more interesting, rather than in some cases just have a unit that just has a passive aura that somehow makes unit bulletproof. Again, don't do that, Relic. Stop having officers, even command tanks, that just make units bulletproof. Again, it's a really bad idea, but even then, I think there's just more that can be done with officers, just slightly just sort of, well, I wouldn't call it realistic, but sort of an accurate level, I suppose, in some ways. I mean, again, you want to talk company views, you still got to have the company elements, and the still involves lieutenants and captains, and the very least. I mean, there's so much more there that can be done than what is currently done, which is sort of they might do some things. In some cases, it's just an extra combat unit like the USF lieutenant who just has grenades and a bit of other things, but in other ways, he's not really an officer, he's just another infantry squad. So I think it's definitely an area where there can be more done in terms of, the game design, also just, to bring more sort of, the actual war to the field, and also just, reflect the whole company element of the game better. And in that regard, I think the overall idea would just be to sort of actually implement lieutenants and captains, I think, for all factions, but of course they sort of operate differently, down the road. And that way, sort of at least achieving something a bit more there, because ultimately, just like everybody had, basic infantry squads, they also all had officers. I mean, it all basically then boils down to how the officers operate and how they were equipped. In that regard, for example, the German army put a lot of emphasis on its junior officers, the lieutenants, and its captains, and all that. Quite a lot more of them. They were very much, at the front line doing things, shouting out orders. They're sort of much more, in the deep of it, and thus you could have abilities to reflect that. They're sort of very good at handing out orders to individual squads. They could be these sort of buffs to the individual units, or maybe sort of just augmentations, if you will, for a brief while, where they sort of can do something extra. That way you're sort of creating that more feel of, alright, this is a guy leading from the front, he's used to it, he's just handing out our orders, he might also be a bit, sort of frontline command, whereas again for an arm that might not be putting that much an emphasis on the, officers do that kind of stuff. They could have sort of slightly different abilities that might be more useful for sort of real line operations. They might be able to, again, like the use of captains, supervised structures, push out units faster. They could also, help units, dig fortifications faster, like so that was thrown there, where then all field fortifications just being done overall faster than otherwise. Those sorts of things there could be a way of doing it as well, or even just, build caches, maybe, sort of set caches being, built by officers, maybe, or something else entirely. I mean, or just maybe special sort of defenses to be built. So those, I think, are also options there that can sort of, be done. So that way, bring up emphasis. Of course, those officers also be, maybe less combat able, but at the same time, they'd also probably be cheaper in some ways, because partly, again, they're not going to expect to fight at the front so much, but at the same time, they just, from a balanced up perspective, also just going to be cheaper, because again, they're not going to be, less, as say, combat impressive as, a German lieutenant running around there with his, command squad with, all sorts of goodies and guns. You could then, further maybe sort of try and create a system where, like, there's sort of a bit more, veterancy going on, well then maybe you're not just, replacing a lieutenant, you're just bringing him back, and that way there's sort of more, shall we say, long-term permanence in the officer. You can maybe, like, make some, shall we say, personality into it, and you can have the, like, have the company captain, be sort of a customizable unit, sort of choose out for battle, just visually maybe even just, sort of create something more of a, field commander presence, an avatar, if you will, that can that way sort of reflect the player a bit more. So I mean, that would be pretty cool. You don't just choose companies. You have a captain, and then you sort of customize him. Have him sort of reflect what kind of sort of commanders or companies you sort of got attached here. that way, because it might look a bit differently depending on that. A bit like, for example, how the old Schwimmwagen or Kettenkreuts. I think it's actually only the Kettenkreuts. There'll be sort of slight differences visually depending on that, for example. So that could be another way of sort of achieving a sort of greater, I think, interconnectivity between the different layers of the game, and that way sort of create, I think, an overall bigger and more interesting experience. So, for example, again, you got your captain, you might choose, I don't know, a Luftwaffe doctrine. If you say, the Germans, then you sort of, his chaps might be running about with, would be Luftwaffe troops. And there might be some other Luftwaffe kit that's sort of getting, walking around with them, choosing an assault doctrine. Boom, the command squad suddenly looks a lot more, assault-like. If it's a more armor-oriented doctrine, then, might, be more pioneer types or something else attached to the sort of captain's units. Maybe sort of a tank officer sort of also, sneaking about there to provide support. Who knows? So just more radio kits. So that, I think, could easily be a way of sort of just that way expanding upon the game's elements, while also at the same time reflecting the whole company command structure and that element of war, which tends to be sort of very, heavily neglected. There's the human element, the infantry element, which again relies heavily on officers. And similarly, you could also do something like that for command tanks, maybe making the sort of more of an integral element of the game, where again, certain tanks, just, again, can hand out orders, target that fast, target those bastards fast, pull back, pop smoke, whatever. And then there might be, other, depending on the army, again, the other sort of types of tank commanders, could do different things depending on the army. So that could also, offer up sort of, different ways, further enhancing the different play styles of the armies, but then sort of making better use of the officers, rather than just having them here with, one guy gives out an aura, the other guy does something silly, and the other guy, needs several reiterations before he becomes even remotely useful, aka the artillery field officer. I mean, I think, just trying to integrate officers, that is lieutenants and captains, better into the game would overall, I think, pretty beneficial, results for Company Heroes 3 as a whole, and of course the entire Company Heroes series, because, I mean, they are pretty, I think, important. It also does remind me at times that Relic just really seems to hold a grudge against officers, because you look at sort of most of the games, throughout, even Dawn of War, like, whenever it comes to the Imperial Guard, all the officers, like, they're somehow magically managing, like, there's just the very top, and then sergeants, like lieutenants, captains, majors, all gone. And somehow consistently happens across every single one of the games. Entire change of commands just mysteriously evaporate. I'm really starting to suspect, by the way, that Relic has a huge chip on the shoulders when it comes to officers. Like, just the usual regular chain of command, they just for some reason hate it and do nothing want to do. And really, I think they should actually be exploring this element of the game, or of, a company, and, try to elevate it to be, more, I think, critical and, overall more useful role within the game, rather than just being, this thing that's so, oh, it does something cool, or, oh, hey, this guy's got an aura. That's clearly not going to be used for blobbing at all. No, sirree, Bob. Not at all. And of course it gets used to it because, they just haven't thought about doing anything else with officers, rather than just, having them there. And again, I think that's, something they could really work a lot on, to that way, further, again, elevate the game. Do more with it, add a whole element there. I mean, again, if they add a morale system, officers could that way also play a critical role in that way, boosting morale. Lieutenants could sort of just more there to stabilize it. Captains could, morale boost or something like that. I mean, that's the sort of aura they could get away with. That's sort of, morale aura, if you will. And then, of course, if the officer dies or gets wounded, sent back, who knows, boom, morale plummets. So that way, officers could also, be, more morale boosters, and, again, play in with that system. Plus, if they do add officers and sort of more, regular elements, who knows, they could, do something with snipers that isn't just completely boring and actually interesting. Maybe. There's a part of me that sincerely doubts it. So, I think that sort of largely covers sort of my ideas on officers, again, just at least most of them, and how, again, they can be, done more with to add more to the game, expand upon the game. So, I mean, I hope you agree with it. I hope you just enjoyed this little talk I had about it. If you did, subscribe, like, share, comment on it. If you'd like me to do, of course, do consider donating or pledging on Patreon. Helps me out a ton, pays for food, rent. So, I mean, if you like what I do and want to see me keep doing it, do please consider donating or pledging. Links in the video description. This is Imperial Dane signing off for another time, another video. Cheers.